Hello, so it's Joey Lorraine, dancer and astrologer on Tuesday, September 6th, 2011, the day after Labor Day. So yesterday, September 5th, was a huge birthday day for all the musicians, songwriters, singers out there. Rubiana Carilli, who happens to be a close friend of mine, the most renowned jazz flutist in the world today. It was her birthday. It was also John Cage's birthday, who was the composer for choreographer Mercy Cunningham. And of course, Google is letting us know that it was also lead singer-songwriter of Queen, Freddie Mercury's birthday yesterday. So as an astrologer, of course, I was really curious as to why would he decide to rename his last name after the planet Mercury. I have not found an answer after all my reading and research that I've done, so if anybody out there has the story behind that, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it, because he really does represent the essence of the Mercury archetype. In astrology and in mythology, Mercury is known as the messenger of the gods. Mercury is the planet that is closest to the sun. So for that reason, when you think about it, I do think that there is kind of like a light, a spirit, important message of optimism and everything that the sun represents that comes through Mercury to us here on Earth, because Mercury does lie between the sun and Earth. I really do believe that Freddie Mercury's message was music, undoubtedly. Mercury also rules Virgo, and it so happens, of course, that Freddie was a Virgo, and it rules Gemini. He had a lot of Gemini in his chart too. So Virgo and Gemini are the mutable signs in the zodiac, meaning that they can kind of go in different ways. They're adaptable, they're changeable, which actually gives them a lot of power and creativity. Also, for that reason, Mercury can be associated with being neutral or with being bisexual. So I think that's kind of interesting. More interesting, however, is Liz Green's take on Mercury. Liz Green is the astrologer who kind of is the pioneer of bringing in psychology and fusing it with astrology. So he's a Jungian psychologist. And in Jungian psychology, there's this idea of the purer, which is basically the Peter Pan complex of, you know, being forever young and never wanting to grow up. And she talks about how this complex is famous among musicians and some actors as well. I definitely think that Freddie Mercury fits into this category. His life was cut off too short. It seemed 45 was just too young for him to go away. And even into the very end, I don't think he officially announced his illness until a day or two before he actually passed away. So there's this idea that he needed to stay vital. He wanted to be youthful. He wanted to be truly the essence of who he was up until the very end. And through a mythological perspective, you would think of this as that when you have this pure energy inside you, when you have this kind of thing that just has to live forever and you never want it to die, well, you can't die. You can't grow wrinkles. You can't get gray. You can't grow wiser, because that just defies the essence of who you really are. It's sad to die too young. Of course it is. It's tragic. Yet there is an integrity to it, because at the moment of your death, your youth and everything that you are is still kind of at play. That's a way to kind of look at it. It's a huge sacrifice, but yet the integrity is there, right? And I do feel that I can kind of relate to that. He sacrificed so much to his fans and to the music industry, to us. When we listen to Queen, when we hear his voice, when we look at him, we think of the youthful, optimistic vitality that his music brought forth. We don't really think of him, at least I don't, think of him as growing old and weak. No, he definitely is forever young. What also interests me most, especially being interested in asteroids happen to be smaller versions of planets that we can really kind of look into, find out more about any particular aspect of our personality, especially if we're an artist. right? And Freddie Mercury's chart, it's really interesting as a musician and as a singer, a brilliant one at that, that he doesn't have any water in his chart. Water is the most musical element, I think, going on in astrology, and he has no water. He also doesn't have any Taurus, right? Taurus is also a sign that's very associated with singing ability and music as well. So no Taurus, no water, no nothing, yet he's this brilliant musician. I thought that was kind of interesting. Whenever we have an element that is missing in our charts, what happens is that our lives usually become focused around acquiring that element in some way to complete ourselves and who we are, right? Great example of this is Lucille Ball, right? You don't really have to be an astrologer to kind of think about, okay, well, what sign would she be? Leo, of course, yeah. And she doesn't have any other planets in any fire. So that Leo energy, especially in the sun, it's a great match, kind of just takes over her life and kind of marks, I think, the essence of who she is and what her life is really all about, right? Well, for Freddie Mercury, water already tells me in some way, if I can find any water in his chart, that may be a key to really figuring out, what his life is all about, who he really is, what makes him feel complete. It just so happens that the music asteroid in astrology, called Euterpe, right? And mythology, it's known as the lyric poetry, symbol of songwriting, right? Of music, is in the strongest possible degree of the most musical, wateriest sign in the zodiac, Pisces. It's the Aries point. We call it the Aries point in astrology, which is the 0 degrees. It means it's the very beginning of the sign, which means that it just encompasses the full expression of what the sign is. At the end of the zodiac, Pisces, which supposedly takes up all the energies of all the other signs, it's just magnificent. He needed music to feel complete in his life. And the message came through loud and clear, I think, which is, I don't know, maybe in one way or another why he decided to choose Mercury to be his last name. It happens also to be that Euterpe is a goddess, right? Not a god. And he did decide to name his group Queen, under a lot of speculation at that point, which was, I think, kind of gutsy for him. I think that also is kind of interesting. Somehow this little bitty asteroid really, I think, became a symbol for the magic of who he was. So I think of the planets, for example, Mercury, in this case, as being the dancer, being the performer on stage, and the asteroids being the smaller versions of the planets as being the dancer who's in the studio, who's rehearsing, who's working day in and day out, day after day. But it doesn't mean that the dancer in the studio is not as important or doesn't shine as much as the dancer on stage. It's just a little bit more specific. It's just a little bit more personalized and more intimate, but just as powerful and just as bright, right? So the goddess Euterpe in Pisces shines through Freddie Mercury and his message to us. So happy belated birthday, Freddie Mercury, messenger of the gods.